Despite all the challenges we face, I remain convinced that yes, the future is female.
And my greatest desire is to lead him right into impeachment.
We need strong programs so that people that love us and want to love our country are allowed in.
The nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative, and the nomination is confirmed.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
We burning down the night, shooting bullets at the moon, baby. This is how we roll.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America. Coming up next, our final news roundup and information overload hour.
The executive order began to be developed before I ever became the Secretary of Homeland Security, before my confirmation. Just after the inauguration, my staff, a very small number, and myself had some initial cuts on that. Some changes were made. It was released, I think, as you recall, the third one I'm talking about now was released late on a Friday. We knew it was going to be released that day. The desire was to get it out. The thinking was to get it out quick so that potentially people that might be coming here to harm us would not take advantage of some period of time that they could jump on an airplane and get here, or get here in other ways. So that was the thinking. In retrospect, I should have, this is all on me, by the way, I should have delayed it just a bit so that I could talk to members of Congress, particularly the leadership of committees like this, to prepare them for what was coming, although I think most people would agree that this has been a topic of President Trump, certainly during his campaign and during the transition process.
So today we deliver a message in one very unified voice to these forces of death and destruction. America and its allies will defeat you. We will defeat them. We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism, and we will not allow it to take root in our country. We're not going to allow it. You've been seeing what's been going on over the last few days. We need strong programs so that people that love us and want to love our country and will end up loving our country are allowed in, not people that want to destroy us and destroy our country.
Mr. President, how far are you willing to take your travel ban fight?
We're going to take it through the system. It's very important. It's very important for the country, regardless of me or whoever succeeds at a later date. I mean, we have to have security in our country. We have to have the ability. When you take some place like Syria, you take all of the different people pouring around. And if you remember, ISIS said, we are going to infiltrate the United States and other countries through the migration. And then we're not allowed to be tough on the people coming in? Explain that one. So we'll see what happens. We have a big court case. We're well represented, and we're going to see what happens.
Is it going to go to the Supreme Court, you think?
Good. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't have to. It's common sense. You know, some things are law, and I'm all in favor of that. And some things are common sense. This is common sense.
It's common sense. News Roundup Information Overload Hour. Our top story today. We await arguments now before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most liberal appeals courts in the country. I don't have a lot of optimism as to what is going to happen tonight. You know, very few of you paid attention when I pointed out, and this got leaked by the Washington Free Beacon, and good for them. They got a hold of a retreat that was 100 big donors to the Democratic Party at the Turnberry Isle Resort in Florida. And in this, they came up with a Democratic Matters strategic plan for action, which was supposed to be private and confidential. And attending the retreat obtained by David Brock's private and confidential memorandum, he put this together. He's the guy that runs Media Matters. They outline a 4-year agenda to stop Donald Trump, attack Donald Trump and Republicans using his group. By the way, if it's a 501c3 and they're involved in this, it raises political questions in a lot of different ways. But anyway, that they would use their organizations, Media Matters, American Bridge, the group Crew, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, that already has filed suit against Trump, or have gone after him, I should say. And then it comes up with a memo containing plans to defeat Trump through impeachment. and expanding their mission to combat government misinformation. In other words, fake news from my interpretation, ensuring a Democratic control of the Senate in 2018, which I don't think is going to happen. And then it says filing lawsuits against the Trump administration. And this is now going to be one of the major tactics that the left is using to stop the president. And they will be out there judge shopping. They'll go to liberal judges like they did in San Francisco and Minneapolis, knowing that any appeals will go to the liberal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which once again highlights the importance of the Supreme Court choice of Neil Gorsuch to get on the court and then take Antonin Scalia's spot. Now, law is very simple. The law says, the U.S. Code 181182, whenever the president, I'm reading it to you, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens, any class of aliens into the U.S. would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. The law is clear. That will be argued at 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of hope with the Ninth Circuit based on their history. Joining us to discuss, Jay Sekulow, the American Center for Law and Justice, Brian Claypool, civil rights attorney. Jay Sekulow, well, we know what they're doing. They put it in writing. They want to stop Trump at all costs. They're using the courts to do it. They're judge shopping, in my opinion. And they know any appeal would be in the Ninth Circuit, so I think we're going to see an awful lot of this strategy. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I think they've implemented that strategy in the selective way in which, look, they're entitled to do it. They did it, and that is pick a district court that will be ultimately reviewed by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is, number one, as you said, Sean, the most liberal Court of Appeals in the United States. But I do need to point this out as a Supreme Court lawyer. They're also the most overturned Court of Appeals in the United States. So oftentimes you will get a decision out of the Ninth Circuit, and the overturn rate is upwards of 80%. So while I'm with you, I'm not very optimistic about what's going to happen at the Ninth Circuit, although the law and precedent is clearly with the administration here. You mentioned Section 1182F, which is the ability of the president to make the determination by proclamation to stop particular groups or individuals or groups from coming in the United States. It is crystal clear. So the Ninth Circuit is hard-pressed to do this. Having said that, nothing will shock me with the Ninth Circuit. That means from there, I mean, this could be, Sean, we could see a case at the Supreme Court of the United States literally tomorrow. That's how quick this could move.
Yes.
Brian?
Yeah, Sean, one problem with Jay's point is what happens if Gorsuch is not approved and then this matter gets sent to the U.S. Supreme Court with 8 Supreme Court justices? It could eventually end up in a 4-4 vote. And then guess what? It reverts back to the ruling by the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. So ironically, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal could actually be the mini U.S. Supreme Court in making the final determination on whether this executive order is constitutional. So that could be bad news for President Trump. Look, I think his heart is in the right place, Sean, but I don't think his head is in the right place. And why do I say that? Because I've read the executive order, and it uses danger. It uses threat of terroristic danger in the U.S. as a pretext for a religious-based travel ban, plain and simple.
Jay?
What makes no sense about your argument is, number one, you know that in any potential crime, you always are looking at who are the likely suspects. And read the statute itself. It says any class of
I read it. Did you read?
Hold it. I've read the entire executive order too. And here's the problem. It isn't a Muslim ban. It happens to be these 7 countries which the previous administration put in place as the countries of concern. These were the countries of primary concern. Those are the countries that are listed. It's not designating them by their religious affiliation, but rather by the country of origin. And the truth of the matter is that when it comes to, and I know you're going to jump to this provision about the Christians and other religious minorities getting priority, that's the way the entire immigration system is set up. And that's not necessarily for Christians, but for religious minorities if they are a suspect class that could be harmed. And that's exactly what this order did. There's nothing in this order that is remarkable.
But wait, before you guys go any further, I read you what the law says. Is there anything unconstitutional about a law if we have separation of powers, co-equal branches of government, and Congress passed that law, signed into law by a president, and the President Trump is following the law, unlike his predecessor. Now, is there anything unconstitutional about a president whose first role is commander-in-chief from doing his job and looking at a real clear present danger to the country and using his authority to stop it?
The answer to your question, Sean, is yes and no. Yes, he can issue an executive order. Yes, he can issue a proclamation, but it has to comport with the U.S. Constitution. Here,
okay, tell Jay where it's unconstitutional.
Oh, absolutely, I'll tell you. Under two grounds. Number one, under the First Amendment Establishment Clause. Clearly,
how in the world you don't really think, Brian, this is a violation
under 5B and 5E of this executive order, it patently creates a law that unduly favors one religion over another. That's plain and simple. And number two, under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, you can't discriminate on anybody. Doesn't have to be a U.S. citizen. Anybody. It uses the word any based on religion and national origin. Clearly, portions of this executive order discriminate against Muslim-based refugees and immigrants.
Okay, Sean, if I may, first of all, I've argued a lot of cases in the Supreme Court involving the Establishment Clause. Do you really believe, and I know you don't, Brian, that this order establishes a religion in the context of the First Amendment? The answer to that has to be no, because it's country of specific origin that is the basis upon which the determination is made. The statute itself provides for that. The Constitution allows that. That's number one. Number two, this talking about, giving religious benefit to one group or of another, that happens every single day throughout the entire world, including in the United States. As we look at our asylum laws and refugee laws, of course we give preference to groups that are being persecuted in an area that don't have protection. That's as old as our naturalization refugee laws in the United States. So again, Sean, I go back to this. There is nothing in here that is remarkable. This is not like some shocking, I can't believe the president did this. By the way, when President Obama did it from Iraq, did we say that was a discrimination against Muslims? When President Carter did that against Iran, did we say that was discrimination against Shia Muslims, because that's primarily a Shia country? No one said anything. They don't like this because Donald Trump actually put into play what he actually said he would do.
This isn't about partisanship, Jay. It's about the Robart, the district court judge, is Republican. But let's move on to another part.
Okay, you and I both know that district court judges are nominated by the state Senate.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay, that's not true.
Why is Saudi Arabia not in this 7-country Muslim ban when 15 of the assailants in the 9/11 attack were from Saudi Arabia?
Because, Brian, since 9/11, we've entered into intelligence sharing arrangements with the Saudis, with other governments. So the world has changed in 16 years. So that's why. It was also put in place because of these.
Would you agree, though, that, Jay, the basis of this executive order is predicated upon danger to the United States, potential terroristic threats, right?
Right, let me go to Judge Robart, the original judge in this case out in Seattle. The guy that, number one, made factual errors in his decision, claiming there's been no terrorist attack since 9/11 from the countries mentioned, when in fact it was 6 out of 7, and also talked about Black Lives Matter from the bench, which shows that he has a political agenda. We'll go to that, the concept of judge shopping and where this ultimately plays out. Brian Claypool, Jay Sekulow, stay with us. 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. As we continue our top story today, news roundup, information overload. We'll get to your calls, bottom of the half hour, 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. But that, of course, the Ninth Circuit now hearing arguments, 6 Eastern today. We will have audio of this tonight on Hannity at 10 Eastern. They'll release it after the arguments go forward, so I'll have all the highlights for you. Jay Sekulow and Brian Claypool. One of the things I keep pointing out, Jay, it's very simple. The law is simple. The judge has, in the past, shown himself to be a judicial activist, mentioning Black Lives Matter. In this particular case, he said falsely that there's been no terrorist attack since 9/11 from these countries. Well, he's wrong. About 6 out of the 7 has been connections. And then it goes to the Ninth Circuit, as you point out, the most overturned court of appeals in the country. So what do you expect to happen tonight?
Well, a couple things. Number one, the judge did not set forth anything that had a constitutional basis upon which he declared this order unconstitutional. So, which is what's happening here. So here's what actually happened. So it goes before the 3-judge panel today at the Ninth Circuit. They'll argue it by phone. I've done that before. You'll have some audio of that tonight. We will have a decision, I suspect, either this evening, Sean, or first thing in the morning. At which point, assuming, because it's the Ninth Circuit, that it rules against the president, because the panel is not particularly helpful to the president's cause from what I know of these individual judges. But again, you never know. So you got to say, what happens is this: if in fact they affirm the district court order and deny the stay, in other words, no stay pending appeal, in other words, the order does not go into effect, then the United States Department of Justice has a couple of options. First, they could ask for a rehearing on banc, which would be the entire Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to hear the case. That could either be granted or denied. That usually happens in short order. They then can do one of two things. They can take it to the circuit justice, which is Anthony Kennedy, and ask for an enforcement that way. Justice Kennedy can then either grant it, deny it, or refer it to the entire court. So that's basically what you're looking at. And that I've had these cases, Sean, on these kind of emergency hearing issues at the Supreme Court, and literally I've gone from
so it can go to the Ninth Circuit
in a week.
And Justice Kennedy can just say overrule the Ninth Circuit and say no. Independently, he doesn't need. And I got to imagine he's got to take into consideration that the court is a pretty heavy 4-4 split here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Now the court can then grant plenary review. So he could let the order go back into force, and then the entire court could hear it. I'm not so sure, by the way, this case falls down on a 4-4 split, by the way. I think this is one of those cases where the court looks at it, and even if they disagree with the policy of the president, to deny that the president has the constitutional authority to do this and to create an establishment clause issue out of this for all things, I think the court would be hard-pressed to do it.
Jay, the issue is not whether President Trump has the right or power to issue this executive order. It's whether every part of this executive order comports with the U.S. Constitution.
Sure.
And I'm going to make a prediction right now. I think this 3-panel set of judges is going to uphold the restraining order to continue to suspend the travel ban for now. And then the next step, Sean, is going to be we're going to look at the constitutionality of this executive order. And I got to tell you, I think parts of this executive order are going to be struck down as unconstitutional, and I think parts of it.
I think you're wrong because you don't know the process. Jay Sekulow is exactly right. This is going to be sent to Kennedy. Kennedy will decide to either send it to the entire court or make a decision on his own. And I believe if Kennedy gets this case, which I would anticipate that knowing the Ninth Circuit, it doesn't go with the Trump administration. And I bet Kennedy reverses it, game over. And I think it could all happen in a week, as Jay said. We'll see who's right. Jay, we'll see you on TV tonight. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. Your call is coming up straight ahead.